Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasad Buddhade Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachadane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastacha Desha Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. In life, you have to make various choices. Some of these choices, you have some freedom. Some choices, not so much freedom. We're obligated to support our body somehow or other. And then, of course, we have obligations to others. And we're not quite free to do everything we want. Usually there is some choice made by family of what you should do, or how you should study, or what kind of job you should get, or whatever. Many expectations are there. So there's nothing unusual about that. That has been, we can say, a system, not only in the traditional Vedic life, but also around the world, that there's some obligations to the family. And that is also, we can say, natural on one level in terms of karma, because the parents and family are responsible for raising children. So then there's a counter obligation on the part of the children to do something for the parents. So there's some natural obligation there. And if that is not responded to properly, then there's a big disturbance. Or, of course, if the parents don't do anything for the children and don't raise them properly, that's also a problem. So this creates a problem in terms of karma, because it's considered sinful not to acknowledge the contribution of others. So, for instance, in the traditional varnashram system, one has to give respect to the devatas and to the forefathers and to all of mankind, to one's relatives, to all living entities, etc. And if you don't do so, there is a debt. So you have to constantly repay that debt. So every day they do tarpanas, and they offer water and other mantras, etc. to repay that debt. Some sort of worship is there, and respect. So of course that has to be, materialized practically in terms of some obedience to the family, etc. From the spiritual point of view, of course, Bhagavatam says that a father's not a father, a mother's not a mother, a teacher's not a teacher, unless they can deliver you from birth and death. So in other words, the parents and others also have a duty to educate children properly according to the conclusion of the Vedas. And the conclusion of the Vedas is ultimately to make the best use of our human life to transcend human life, and get out of the material body and enter into the spiritual world and serve the Krishna there eternally. So that's another duty of the parents. So the problem comes because parents are not aware of that particular duty, but yet they have the expectation of their children that they have to obey them. So we often get a conflict because of that. And it's sometimes very difficult to resolve. Nevertheless, there should be, give and take on both sides. In other words, the children should respect the parents. At the same time, the parents have to concede spiritual interest on the part of the offspring and encourage that also. So that in that way one can come up with some sort of solution to this conflict that often takes place. it's not a problem only in the modern world. We see in ancient times also there were such problems, even in the Bhagavatam. Priyavrata didn't want to become the king, and then he wanted to become a brahmachari and run off, and then they had to persuade him to become the king. That was parental influence. Okay, you had to be the king. On the other hand, Narada Muni said, no, you just be a brahmachari. So a little conflict was there. Then Brahma came and resolved the conflict. So it's not only in modern times, but ancient times also that same type of conflict was there. So in general, we should work out a peaceful solution between parents and children. And the children, if they do have the good fortune of understanding the importance of spiritual life, that is to their very great credit. And somehow they have to convince the parents of that. There are various levels of commitment to a spiritual life. Of course, there's a very general commitment, and then most people, and you say, oh, I'm already spiritual because I'm following tradition. So in that sense, some aspects of karma yoga they're following. So in that's in one sense spiritual because it's dharma and it's related to the Supreme Lord, etc. And there is some worship and respect for the Supreme Lord in that system. So in one sense, okay, passable. But generally, a person should strive for more than that. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna recommends better than karma yoga is jnana, better than jnana is Astanga yoga, better than Astanga yoga is Bhakti yoga. So we're somewhat fortunate if we're able at least to follow the karma yoga aspect to some degree. Or better if we can get more interest in the higher elements, the spiritual elements, jnana, yoga, or bhakti. So the jnana and yoga elements are not much encouraged by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. He says ultimately just take to the process of bhakti. So the emphasis should be upon attaining the highest system of spiritual life, not the intermediate levels. So if we have that goal, we're very fortunate. If we can understand that the bhakti is the highest process and we should commit ourselves to that. Very, very good. And within bhakti, of course, we have different types of bhakti. The Sri Vaishnavas and the Madhvas, other sampradayas are also doing bhakti. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has presented a system of bhakti that is also quite unique. And when Lord Chaitanya established his system, even though it is mentioned in the Vedic literatures like Harinama, Kevalam, etc., all that's there, and Krishna says, surrender to me, Bhagavad Gita. The way in which Lord Chaitanya introduced this to the people created some opposition also. And people would criticize, oh, why are you doing this? Why are you disturbing the peace? why are you telling us to give up so many things, etc.? Always, even for Lord Chaitanya, there was criticism, etc., and after him as well. Nevertheless, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu within Bhakti has presented a very flexible method and also a very powerful method of spiritual advancement. That is Nam Sankirtan. And the method is revolutionary, and the goal is also revolutionary. New goal. Not just appreciate and realize the Lord, but to develop prema for Krishna. So this is also quite unique to get a direct realization and experience of Krishna in his pastimes. So it's a new idea to present Krishna and his pastimes as the ultimate goal of realization. So this is, and of course, what's the plus point of this is that if you do this, of course, it's easiest process available for everybody, regardless of varna and ashram or whatever. And it's also, it gives the highest bliss, most intense type of bliss. So these are, say, advantages for the people of Kali Yuga if they take to this process. They get the highest result and also the easiest process. So if one is fortunate to accept the process or to have faith in the process, very good. One is considered to be most fortunate. Because as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, very rarely does one actually understand me in truth. So very rarely does one take to that process by which one can really understand and realize Krishna. Very rare. So if we come to this position of developing faith in the process of Bhakti and Sankirtan and Krishna, that's a very, very high position. In one sense, spiritually speaking, we've already graduated from, school and from college. And we're on advanced degree if we get up to this idea of accepting Krishna. So it's after PhD status, actually, in terms of evolution, mental evolution over many births. But we come to a very, very high stage if this has happened, that we develop that faith in Krishna through Sankirtan. So, therefore, very, very fortunate if that has happened. So, we should realize that this process is very scriptural and therefore correct, very accurate. And as is pointed out by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Harinam Chintamani, we should never think that the glories of chanting the name of the Lord are ever exaggerated in the scriptures. Okay? So whatever any other process can give, in Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Stanga Yoga, or in Bhakti Yoga, it is all available simply by chanting the name of Krishna. Now that may seem very far-fetched. And of course, even in Lord Chaitanya's time, that was challenged. So Haridas Thakur was glorifying the holy name, and he said, by chanting the holy name, even in an inattentive way, you can get liberation. The goal of the Gyanis and Yogis for many births, and you just inadvertently say Krishna, then you're above them. You surpass the Gyani and the Yogi. So then the Brahmins would criticize that. How could you say that? This is nonsense. Because we know in scripture that you read the Upanishads, then you have to very strictly practice jnana and go through many processes to get liberation. You're saying here, okay, this inadvertently anybody, even a Sudra or a Malacha chanting Hare Krishna goes beyond jnani. How can you say that? But it is scriptural. So scripture says one thing about jnana, you get liberation, but it also says so many glorifications of bhakti and more. So these, of course, are all secondary effects of bhakti and of chanting the holy name, that what you can get. The ultimate goal of bhakti and chanting is something quite different. That is Krishna prema, which jnana, yoga, and karma can never give you. So it is very, very, the real goal is much higher than that anyway. But anyway, the chanting of the holy name can give everything. And we should never consider that to be exaggeration. Why? Because it's non-different from Krishna, Supreme Lord Himself. So Krishna gives the results of Karma Yoga. Krishna gives the results of Jnana Yoga, liberation, and of Astanga Yoga. So therefore, everything is achieved by pleasing Krishna. And the easiest way to please Krishna is to chant His name. So, very powerful process. And of course, even accidentally, if we chant, we get effect, as Ajamil did. Karma's gone. So, liberation can be achieved by namabhas, as in the case of Ajamil. All karma is finished. But the goal of the devotee is not that. It is prema. To get to prema, then we cannot just accidentally or inattentively chant the name of Krishna. So, we have some rules to follow. First, of course, we need shraddha, faith. We have to accept the existence of Krishna. We have to accept the authority of the Bhakti scriptures and what they tell us about Krishna. And from that we get jnana. Not impersonal jnana, but knowledge about Krishna and his attractive features and his pastimes. Knowledge about the process of pure bhakti and pure chanting as opposed to contaminated chanting. So very, very important for us to get this knowledge. And then we could practice bhakti with the proper mood. Okay. So inattentive chanting or namabhas means no mood at all. It's just accidental. So we're not even thinking of Krishna. So the definition of bhakti is to perform activities to cultivate a relationship with Krishna favorably, with affection, and without other desires. So when we chant the name of the Lord or we do other services, then this favorability has to be included in our whole process of cultivating bhakti. In other words, we are chanting with affection. We are serving the deity with affection. Of course, we say, well, how can I show affection for the Lord because I'm in the material world and whatever. But the whole qualification for bhakti is we have a little affection. That is shraddha. We have a conviction in the Lord, but we're not criticizing him or thinking he's a material being. We understand and respect his position. So we have some favorable attitude. It's not a mental attitude. It's a orientation of the jiva, the soul. Then we have a bahirmukha jiva, completely opposed to the Lord. No interest in the Lord at all. We're completely concentrating on self, me, I, mine. Then we have the antarmukha jiva, the jiva who becomes. And when that favorability is without other desires, a mixture of desires of things for myself, then that's what we call pure bhakti. So to come to that stage of faith is very good. So then automatically when we do the activities, there should be some favorable, affectionate attitude towards the Lord. Affectionate attitude towards the Lord. Without desiring things for ourselves. So this, if it matures properly, it becomes prema. In the beginning stages, not pure because we have contamination. We have that shraddha, we have a little bhakti, but then we have all the material anarthas with us still. Okay? So therefore, we have a process of bhakti called sadhana bhakti. So if we follow the process of sadhana bhakti properly, then we attain prema. So the whole goal of Nectar of Devotion is to guide the devotee to experience the nectar of devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And how do you do that? Then you have to follow sadhana. And then that is defined very accurately by Rupa Goswami as this Ano Kulyena Krishna Nasilanam and Anya Abhilashita Shunya. That's the whole cornerstone. So in the beginning of sadhana, we're not pure, we have other desires, etc. So how can we practice this type of bhakti as a sadhana? Because we're inherently impure. Ultimately, real pure bhakti is prema. Even bhava has a little contamination. But to get to that stage, at least we have to be aware of our desires. And when we practice bhakti, then we're trying to express that unconditional love We don't have it completely because we do have our anarthas and our other desires, and our interest in Krishna is not that strong. But it's a sadhana. So we're practicing it, trying to cultivate that affectionate relationship. So we do that, one, by chanting the name with affection. Then, of course, we have other processes. Hearing with great eagerness about Krishna, associating with devotees and inspiring each other, worshipping the form of the Lord, engaging our hands and whatever, minds and feet, doing various for the Lord with that favorable attitude. So all of these different actions help the Appa develop that attraction to the Lord without other desires. Now, we're in sadhana, so we do have other desires. Atma is not completely for Krishna, we're struggling. But as we do the process, then gradually those desires subside, anarthas subside, it's called anartha nivritti, and the conviction in Krishna and the affection for Krishna keeps increasing and increasing. The two things go together. So as we advance in our affection for Krishna, to that extent, our anarthas decrease. So that is a healthy position in sadhana if we can do that. And the healthy point is nishta, when the anarthas are not so strong anymore. So they don't bother, they don't disturb our sadhana. And from that position, then very quickly the anarthas get less and less and less and less and less until finally zero. And then one has prema. So, if we want the goal, we have to do the process properly. Okay? So we have various types of bhakti, which are mentioned in Nectar Devotion. So that's the authorized way in which we engage our senses. And then we have the cultivation of the bhakti by doing those activities, engaging the senses with the proper attitude. Right? So the two things go together. Engagement of the senses plus the proper intention behind that. Our intention is not completely pure, but we make that attempt. Yeah? So therefore we have to keep remembering the basic rule, that very definition of bhakti. No other desires except the desire to please Krishna, to somehow express our affection for Krishna. So we do the activities, including chanting, with that. And then it becomes very powerful process. So that is the effective way of doing bhakti. It's not just doing the activity. That works, but it's a very slow process. Ajamil gets his karmas destroyed, etc. But if we want to develop that to prema, then we have to follow specific process. Activities, engagement of the senses and mind, plus the right intention behind that, which is the intention to develop that pure love for Krishna. So that is the true process of bhakti. So to develop the intention properly, etc., and then also with the intention comes, we could say, an emotion or bhava. It's not just an intellectual thing. Okay, we talk about no desires. Okay, like that. The affection has to have some bhava in it, some feeling in it. Now, of course, we have material feelings. So those material feelings generally are considered not very good because these material things have to do with our material relationships. So that's not the type of feeling we're trying to cultivate with Krishna. But it is similar. Therefore, in the spiritual world, we have rasas. Krishna and devotees have rasas. Material world, we also have rasas. But these rasas are all binding to us. They cause problems for us. That rasa causes joy. So we're trying to develop that rasa for Krishna. So this is the beginning stage. This is our practice to do that, develop that rasa. So there has to be some feeling for Krishna, some bhava or abhava bhas, we could say, some reflection of that bhava, which is a later stage, along with our intention for Krishna. And then we do the activities. So this becomes a very powerful way for us to advance in devotional service. So we have the process, and then we have to do the process regularly. Why? Because our mind is already conditioned to the opposite. To recondition the mind takes a lot of effort. So, therefore, we need to, we can say, recondition the mind, retrain the mind. So that takes some effort. So if we do things regularly, then we get good result. So everybody has the experience. Why you go to school? Because you learn things. How do you learn things? You study. What does study mean? Repetition. You keep looking at it, keep memorizing it again and again and again and again and again, and then it's in your head after a while. So that's how you stick things in your mind, by repetition, repeatedly. Of course, that's material. So, similarly, we can use the mind spiritually also, as we use the senses. So, very important that we recondition the mind, not just the senses are engaged. We have to retrain the mind properly. So the training for the mind, of course, is to develop this new program of developing interest in Krishna, etc., etc., which follows the interest of the soul, the Atma. So we're trying to get the mind to cooperate with the Atma, who has an interest in Krishna. But the mind is has old conditioning. It keeps pushing us back in the material world. So, therefore, we have to start working on that mind. So that is why we have regular sadhana, to reprogram the mind, to develop new habits for the mind. But of course, that new program ultimately is based upon the Atma, and Atma's interest in Krishna. So the two things go together. And if we can reprogram the mind, then it becomes easier for the Atma to express itself through different activities of bhakti. So, therefore, we do sadhana with the proper definition in mind, proper emotion, proper intention, etc. And we do it regularly, daily. So by doing this, then we get very good results. We begin to develop new habits in the mind. And when the new habits are there, then it becomes easier for the Atma to express itself through the mind and the body, etc. And the result of all of this is that the Atma develops more and more attraction for Krishna, more and more, and also we get an experience of satisfaction and bliss from this whole process. So this gives us an impetus to do more for Krishna. So we should therefore apply the process properly, and then automatically we get some impetus for advancing, because we get results. If we were never to get results, then we would never even do the process. So we have to figure out the way of getting the best results. So we get the best results if we follow the process very properly according to the scripture, then we get the results. And then we can advance nicely. Okay? So that is, of course, in the material world, that is so also. If you, in chemistry, you have to do an experiment or something and mix chemicals together and get a certain product or whatever like that. So if you follow very exactly what it says, you have to heat up the chemicals to a certain degree, first of all, and then you can mix them together in a certain way, and then you get the right results. But if you don't follow that, then you won't get the result won't be there. You get something else. Wrong temperature, whatever, wrong way of mixing, then you won't get the right result. So in that way, the process of bhakti is quite scientific. You follow it correctly, then you get a particular result. And this is very encouraging for us. So this is how we should perform our sadhana. If the process can be simplified, or we could say, we can simplify the rules very nicely. All we have to do is remember the definition of bhakti given by Rupa Goswami, Anya Abalashta Shunya, that verse. And then we meditate on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instructions, how to chant, Srinada Pisnishina Torah Pisnishina, etc. So that will give us the correct intention and purity and emotion, so that we can advance properly. So we're trying to express this affection for the Lord, but we will say, well, I don't know what spiritual affection, because all I'm used to is a material affection, which is Maya. So to help us, then we have these guidelines given in the third verse of Shishastaka, that you have to be humble than the blade of grass, more tolerant than the tree, give respect to others, don't expect respect for yourself. So these are intrinsic to pure love. If we want to love Krishna, then we cannot be proud and put ourselves in a very high position. We have to be willing. We put ourselves and we accept whatever Krishna gives us. And we feel very thankful for whatever we get. And we understand that we have no qualification really at all. But Krishna is all merciful to us. And we tolerate the experiences of the material world. And we don't get upset by anything, understanding that it's our past karma and we've created the situation for ourselves. So therefore, we simply tolerate the situation. So in other words, we are calm in spite of all the events going on around us. And we continue our practice of bhakti. And we respect all living entities. Respect, of course, not just living entities, respect everything, because everything is the energy of Krishna. And it's under his will. It's under his arrangement. So therefore, we give respect for everything that is happening by the will of the Supreme Lord, and all the living entities also. So, with that attitude and understanding our goal of love for Krishna, then the chanting becomes very, very effective for us. So the process is not difficult to follow. If we follow it properly, then we get the results very nicely. And we can apply it in our life. Ultimately, Lord Chaitanya says, it doesn't matter where you are, who you are, what varna, married, unmarried, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Anyone can follow the same process and get the same results. So whether you're grihasta or brahmachari or sannyasi or whatever, it doesn't really matter. If you correctly follow the procedure, then you get these real results. So that makes the process very simple and very powerful. It's beyond all material conditions. Well, the respect means that you can understand that behind the material body and the subtle body there is an Atma, and that we have to give respect to all Atmas as being the Shakti of the Supreme Lord, etc. That doesn't mean that we have to respect their sinful activities or whatever they're doing, but we also realize that they're in that position because of ignorance. They are very unfortunate to be in that position. Therefore, we have to be compassionate towards them rather than angry with them. So our respect doesn't mean that we tolerate everything, but we also don't become disturbed because we realize they're in that position because of certain bad karmas, certain activities they've done, and it's very unfortunate. But we also want to try to lift them out of that position. More about Krishna Prema. Well, of course, most of the nectar devotion is about Krishna Prema. It explains all the details of Prema in terms of different factors like Sthayi Bhava and Sattvika Bhava, Anubhava, and Vibhava, Vyabhachari Bhavas. And they mix together and they produce the highest bliss. So prema means a relationship with Krishna or any other form of the Lord, but with Krishna it becomes more fully manifest. So relationship is established by affection. So Jiva has an affectionate relationship with Krishna. Krishna has an affectionate relationship with the Jiva. That is their loving relationship. And that is expressed in various ways. And that produces more and more bliss. So this is an eternal relationship, spiritual relationship. So once prema is established, it continues forever, and it keeps increasing in its bliss. We have to practice every day. So you can meditate on being like the grass every day or like the tree every day when you're chanting. And think of yourself as being very, very small in relation to Krishna and all the jivas in the material world. We're no special jiva. Whereas one billions of jivas in the material world trying to approach Krishna. So we can just meditate on the verse, we can meditate on the image, we can be inspired by the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Many ways in which we can develop that mood. We see in the life of devotees and Lord Chaitanya many examples of all of these qualities.
Similarly, we have to maintain strictness in the materialistic people also, because we are working.
Yeah.
We have to deal with
Yeah. So we should not have asat sangha. So that means in relation to material people, we should not develop intimate relationships and intimate exchanges. Then we get influenced by them. So if we're on a very intimate level of joking and friendliness and eating their food and all this, then we'll get very easily influenced by them. So we have to keep our distance in that way. At the same time, we can also be sympathetic to them because we should also see it as jivas, and we should have some compassion for them. But then we have to express that in different ways. If they're very inimical, we cannot do much with them. We have to be neutral. If they are somewhat favorable, then we can preach to them or whatever. Yeah.
What is happening, you have to think it is by Lord's blessing. So it is happening due to my past karma. How can I see that it is Lord who is giving that?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, karma itself is an arrangement of the Supreme Lord also. At the same time, we understand that that karma is there for our advantage as well. We learn from that. So we should never be hostile to the Supreme Lord because of the karma. Rather, we understand that it's a chance for us to learn something. So ultimately, everything is under the Lord. But within that, then the jiva also has some responsibility of choice of what to do. In the material world, we make choices, then we get karma. When we become spiritual, then we choose spiritual life over material life. At that point, then the Lord becomes interested in the jiva and helps the jiva more. And therefore Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, I give you the intelligence by which you can come to me. So Krishna develops more interest in the particular jiva who is practicing bhakti. So within that, we cannot, demand or expect too much from the Lord. But we take what He gives. And we understand that's exactly what we need at this particular time. We don't expect more than what He wants to give us at a certain point in time. At the same time, we also understand that the Lord has a plan for us. And He knows what is best for us. So with that conviction, we go throughout our life and accept whatever material things are there, whatever, and we keep praying for the mercy of the Lord so that we can advance. That's all.
You are doing devotion at very, not in a higher level, you are doing a very starting stage. So how can we think that Lord is planning for us? But not really Lord is seeing us and Lord is investing in planning for us. There is some contradiction. Like we are nothing before Lord, and
because we accept Him as the Supreme Lord, then we know He knows everything. So in that sense, we don't have to go into detail and think for days on end, wow, what's the Lord going to do for me next and next and next and next like that. But just understand that ultimately, under His will, He will do what is best for us. That's all.
While doing sadhana, hearing, reading, chanting, but in the course of time, I feel that this process will become mechanical. So what is the barometer that I'm advancing and unleashing Bhakti?
Yeah, so that is why we have to do that process with this whole definition in mind. That the Atma is trying to express some affection for the Lord. In all of our actions, we have to do that. We have to try to establish an affectionate relationship to the Lord in our chanting or hearing or whatever. Then it has better effect on us. And then it loses its mechanical nature. If we don't think, we just do the activities of hearing or chanting or whatever, then it becomes mechanical. We're not attentive. We're just, something is going in our ear and something is coming out of our mouth. No devotion involved in the whole process. Then that becomes mechanical. So we have to practice developing that devotion. Because Krishna says, I accept the devotion, not the act. Whether you offer a leaf or fruit or flower, or a big flower, little flower, doesn't matter. But it's the devotion which is the important element there.
Because not advancing bhakti, there should be some result from what you are doing. But like chanting, Hare Krishna, devotion process will not depend, like we don't know how it reacts, we don't have any control over that. But then if you are doing and you are not getting the result, then how can we control that? How can we continue doing it?
Well, then we have to, if we don't get any result, then we have to understand we're not doing the process properly. And if we do it properly, we'll get result. So one result, of course, is we feel some peace and satisfaction internally that we don't get from other activities in this material world. And if we're very observant, that we will also see that Krishna makes certain arrangements for us so that we can advance. So these are some signs that Krishna is responding to our bhakti.
You mentioned that the devotee's position is very fortunate. That compared to everybody else, the devotee's position is very fortunate because they have the understanding that Krishna is Supreme Lord and they have the faith on the Supreme Lord and they follow the process. But in the devotee community, the children who are born in the devotee's community actually, their mind is very tender and they get everything, take everything without endeavoring for anything, they are getting everything. How do they relate that actually their position is very fortunate? And how to educate them their position is fortunate for the children? Because we devotees actually we have some kind of material experience and we used to relate to that. How our position is fortunate.
Well, education. They can understand their good fortune by looking at the rest of the material world. They don't have to experience it directly, but they can see the material world for what it is. Turn on television and see the news every day. Then you understand material world not a very good place.
But because the devotees, the problem with the devotees children is actually they are mostly covered with the outside. They don't have that much of exposure with the material compared to.
Well, then you're saying that better to live in the material world than be exposed to Maya? But then you complain about that also. That, it's too much Maya, I shouldn't work in the material world. So, we have to see the positive points of living in a devotional family, etc. And whatever experience of the material world that they need, they're probably going to get it eventually anyway. They'll get that experience sooner or later. Why?
Sometimes we are forcing ourselves to do the regular sadhanas. Because if we want to do some material activities, we are easily doing. We are not forcing ourselves. As for Bhagavad Gita, we are part and parcel of the soul because while we don't have that tendency.
Yeah, but that's because our spiritual taste is much less than our material taste. So Shraddha means we get a little bit of taste for Krishna, but then we have a large amount of taste for Maya. So therefore it becomes difficult to increase that spiritual taste in the beginning. When it reaches a certain level, it becomes easier. That level is called Nishtha, when our taste for Krishna becomes enough that the material tendencies become under control.
When we come to Bhakti after a certain period of time, initially our anarthas will go down. But when we start chanting, then after a certain period of time, we see that our anarthas come on surface. So we see that anarthas are increasing. So how to handle that stage or overcome that?
Well, if anarthas are increasing, of course, it could be due to aparads, which means we're not following the process properly. And we have some hostility towards devotees or the process of bhakti or Krishna or something is there. Or it could be that the anarthas were already there and they're just surfacing at a particular moment. So in either case, the best way to counteract the anarthas is the process of bhakti itself. That we try to follow with devotion, with that bhakti, in a regular way. And if we do so, then those problems will become insignificant.
Is there any effect from the apparatus at the mind level?
Yes, because eventually if it's in the mind and it's not stopped at that level, then it becomes physical later on, or vocal or whatever. What? What about it? Can change?
Can
No, generally doesn't happen. The horoscope remains the horoscope. The planets at birth remain the same horoscope throughout life. It doesn't alter. But we can change the effects of your karma, which is the prediction of astrology. So just chanting the holy name once can destroy all your karmas. However, Krishna usually keeps a pattern of karma there, even for the Prem Bhakta. So there'll be some pattern of karma. It may not be intense, but there's some little pattern of karma remaining even for the pure devotee. But in any case, ultimately, when the devotee gives up his body and he has no karma, then he's out of the material world. So his karma's all gone.